Welcome to Defying Gravity, Julian Elliott, founder, among many interesting things in your background, of Covidence, a startup that I'd love you to describe to our listeners to open up. Tell us your story.
Thanks, Helen. It's great to be here. Covidence is essentially a scientific software SaaS. So we have created a software platform that's used by academics, governments, and others around the world, essentially to make sense of science. So there's a kind of fire hose of scientific information. A lot of it is what we'd now call slop, I guess, or fraudulent. And, there's a really important process for the world in trying to make sense of that and understand what do we really know when we're talking about any particular topic or question. So Covidence is a platform that people use in order to make sense of that, using, of course, what we used to call machine learning, now call AI, and then use that to kind of get to a really rigorous kind of bottom line about what we know on any particular topic.
Now, in your past, I think you talk about this. You were actually a practitioner of medicine. Tell us how you made that move into Covidence and the genesis of this journey.
Sure. So I was an infectious diseases physician, specifically in HIV. So I spent most of my career looking after people with HIV. In the early 2000s, I lived and worked in Cambodia for a number of years. It was a very particular time. This was the time when global health was funded and supported by governments around the world, in contrast to our current state. It was also the time when there was, the world was being ravaged by HIV. And importantly, where there was a lot of resources and treatments for people with HIV in high-income countries, but virtually no treatment available in other countries. So I went to Cambodia originally to do research, but actually ended up most of my time working with the government, with the Ministry of Health, to try and scale up their HIV program. And I was really struck by how hard it was for my Cambodian colleagues to access the information they needed in order to make the best decisions about the design and the rollout of that those health programs.
Yes.
So I ended up playing a kind of manual role of trying to help them find the research information they needed in order to design the best possible program. So what is sometimes now called an evidence broker or an evidence intermediary. And it really struck me that I was like a copper wire, this expensive expat sitting in Phnom Penh, somehow being the interface to global knowledge just seemed wrong. And so after returning to Australia, doing clinical research for a number of years, this kind of thing just kept eating away at me, and eventually decided we needed to find a solution. And I've always been attracted to the power of technology for kind of high leverage intervention. You can have a small team that, if you can create a compelling product, can really have massive impact around the world.
Yeah, incredible. And I know Google has its academic sources and so on. Where did you see the opportunities to?
Sure.
To
Yeah.
Then I'm going to ask, how does AI change it in the new manifestation of AI?
Yeah, so I think it kind of gets to kind of scientific integrity. So again, this is kind of analogous to where we are now. Like, if you're wanting just a quick and dirty summary, like some sort of heuristic overview, indicative kind of gives you some idea about what the science is saying, then of course there are many, many ways to do that, all the way from encyclopedias to Wikipedia to Google Search to Google Scholar, and now of course to ChatGPT and other kind of products like that. If instead you're actually wanting a very, very precise, or what I would call kind of high fidelity understanding of research, then it is still very challenging to do that. Not just with a SaaS kind of platform, but also even with AI today. Yeah. And particularly if you're wanting to ensure really high scientific integrity, so the principles around reproducibility, transparency, explicability. So to do that and do that well and at scale, the kind of general tooling of the world kind of only takes you so far.
Yeah, interesting. And what is the really, it's not new AI, is it? The LLMs, the kind of version of AI. How has that changed your game?
Well, on many levels. So first of all, yeah, we started as an ML research project, and then when we spun out, ML has been kind of at the core of what we've been doing all along. With the kind of more modern LLMs and other kind of AI approaches, it's an exciting time. Like it is enabling us to do things that we were not able to do previously. So
Yeah.
maybe just a bit of detail on this. Again, kind of analogous to what I was saying earlier, many kind of ML or AI approaches essentially giving you, an overall heuristic or some sort of, sense. What I sometimes talk about, again, particularly in a kind of thinking around scientific information, it's like kind of walking across a graph, thinking about kind of nearest neighbors, giving you some sort of indication of what's relevant and useful.
Yeah.
To achieve the very high levels of precision, or technically what we call recall, that has been very challenging. And so some of those challenges remain, even though in kind of general systems, I think people can often feel that these are solved problems. In specific applications, they still remain to be solved.
Yeah.
What I think, I don't know if you know Ben Evans or follow him, but he would say, sometimes better answers are better. Sometimes better answers are not better unless they're right answers. So that sense of a threshold, or what I sometimes talk about is like it's the difference between building a road and a bridge. If you're building a road, more road is just better. You continue to deliver incremental value. You're building a bridge, you can have built 90% of the bridge, but it's still not useful. All right, until you reach a certain threshold. So for our community, recall, extremely high levels of recall, or precision or accuracy or sensitivity, in the order of kind of 95 to 99% is a kind of threshold for them that turns something from being essentially useless into something extremely powerful and useful.
Yeah. Incredible. And it's high stakes. It's
Exactly.
Yeah.
As we say, we're not just talking about increasing clicks on an e-commerce website. We're actually talking about systems that directly actually affect decisions that impact then millions of people, and millions of lives.
Yeah, and that must be the challenge and the magic of Covidence. So you must have had many phases of the building of Covidence in these. It's almost 12 years you've been going. What has been your biggest challenge? And I'll of course follow up with, how did you overcome?
I think in the end, really capital. So again, I think maybe listeners have kind of caught, we are a non-profit. So we started as a research project in kind of classic way within an academic environment. We spun out, but we spun out into a non-profit entity. So an Australian charity with company limited by guarantee, not by shares,
Yeah.
with tax-free, deductible gift recipient status, all of that. So we're essentially a social enterprise. We pursue public good outcomes through a interaction in the world in which we're trading. Now, to do that, it's a very simple kind of metric, as you know, Helen. The pool of capital is much smaller than for commercial ventures. So, my co-founder and I were very, very clear. This is all about mission. So if you think of the kind of hierarchy that drives the company and drives behavior, for-profit entities, of course, legally need to maximize return to shareholders, even though they may have an important mission. That ultimately is the fiduciary duty that they have. For us, it's flipped. So the mission, again, by law, is our number one driver, and we use commercial means to achieve that. I have how would I say, a frustration with nonprofits that are not using all of the tools available to achieve their mission. I think I see, too many nonprofits that have a kind of, I guess, resistance or antibodies to more commercial approaches. You have to be careful, of course, and pursuing the kind of classic social enterprise dual aim of maximizing public good while being commercially successful is difficult. You're kind of making it harder for yourself on some aspects than if you're doing either alone.
Yes.
But I think I'm a great believer in kind of using commercial playbooks in order to achieve public good outcomes. And I think we've demonstrated that you can do that. You can do that successfully. We've grown strongly over that period of time. We're the market leader. We're having really significant impact globally. But one of the key constraints on that has been capital.
Yes.
Now, so it's like anyone raising capital. It takes a lot of work, a lot of shoe leather. But the pool is smaller. But we've had great support from Australian philanthropy, particularly Ian Potter Foundation, Paul Ramsay Foundation, Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation, many others. More recently, Snow Foundation. But we're also been very clear that we need to tap into global philanthropic support. So over the last few years, we've really expanded our focus to engaging with the largest foundations in the world. So Gates Foundation, Wellcome, others like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you ever tempted? I'm curious because I work for some social enterprises that are for profits and very mission driven. Like, were you ever tempted to move across just because of that invest to grow mentality is much easier with for purpose investors?
See, I would argue social enterprise that are in a for-profit entity are, again, their primary driver has to be a return to shareholders. That is the fiduciary duty. So the mission, of course, is important, but it has a different status in that legal structure to a nonprofit, and that has consequences.
Yeah.
So yes, it absolutely has benefits, but you are explicitly putting that above the mission ultimately.
Yeah. So you weren't tempted.
No. So I think that's just contextual. I think in terms of our approach, I would say when we decided to spin out into a nonprofit, it was partly a very strong commitment to the mission, but I think also naivety, to be honest. Like, we were not a kind of sophisticated kind of consumer of all the information around different kind of legal entities and kind of different structures that you could use to pursue a public good mission. I think over time we've, of course, I would say constantly thinking about whether a for-profit vehicle could be an important part of how we pursue our mission. There's no question in our mind the mission will always be primary, and so it will always be governed by a nonprofit entity. But of course, it's possible to pursue some of what we do through a for-profit.
Yes. Yeah.
It has not made sense until this point. So I would say it's just an ongoing conversation, cognizant of the benefits that you've described, but also cognizant of the downside. And maybe just to finish, we find that in our market with our users, having a nonprofit structure and a very strong focus on mission has a lot of resonance. And ultimately we're talking about the world's knowledge, and for many people that we're working with, for our users and customers, that kind of public good focus that resonates deeply, and so does have some commercial advantages.
Yeah, and so many educational institutions are the same. So you use kind with kind, don't you? Yeah, very interesting. And what about at a personal level, Julian? Like moving from medicine into a software company using these commercial techniques. Just how did you navigate? What were your biggest challenges in that move, and how have you navigated it?
I think probably two main ones. So one was just learning. It's an extremely different world, and I would say not just kind of difference in like content or technical area. I think the how would I say, the way that you approach problems, the way you solve problems is very different. At the kind of level of the kind of fundamentals, like the primitives, they're actually very similar. A lot of obviously medical research is around data. How do you find the fastest way to test a particular idea, accrue that data, and then use that to ask more questions? So of course you would get that is very, very similar to
digital marketing or
anything.
forecasting.
Exactly. But then of course the detail is important, and the kind of the nuances around how you pursue that. Linked to that, I would say confidence. I think I see young founders coming into an area with incredible confidence and kind of blasting through. And I think all founders have kind of confidence in the idea. There's that kind of cognitive dissonance of it's kind of suspension of disbelief. I had that, but I don't think I had the kind of typical young founder confidence of I'm just going to crash through. So that's certainly personally been one of the journeys that I've been on, and I've enjoyed that. I think it's been extraordinary getting to know a completely different world, and then maybe we'll talk a bit more about AI, but in some ways AI is like the next cycle of that. We're all having to learn how to operate in a very different world. And so then just the second challenge, I think, has really just been about identity. I had a very strong identity around being a medical doctor, and had very strong, long-standing relationships with my patients with HIV. Some of them I had cared for since diagnosis for many years, and for an important subset of people, they the clinic and the care we provided was an incredible kind of safe haven in the world. And part of that was our personal relationship. And so to step away from that was quite a big step.
Yeah. That's you must have been a wonderful doctor. That's that sounds really tough, but I guess mission drove you. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Maybe let's dive on AI before I ask my penultimate question of your advice for others. Yeah, I mean, it's that learning agility you talk about. We're all restarting that engine in an extraordinary way at the moment. Where are you at with the sort of AI journey of Covidence, and for your own in using it from a UI level right through to the deep systems behind your tech?
Yeah, so we one of the things we were very involved in was the response to COVID. So kind of using technology in order for Australian health system essentially to stay up to date in a very kind of rigorous, precise way with the kind of emerging research. And one of the things we learned through that is just how important it is to build coalitions and communities around the information. Of course, it's a kind of one of those kind of common statements. The data in itself is kind of nothing. It's of course all about the human interaction with the data, and then the way that is used in society. So that's led us in the last few years not only to be continuing to grow Covidence, but engaging much more deeply with the ultimate users of the information produced through Covidence. So governments, UN system, other organizations, even philanthropy.
Yes.
And so in that model, we're very engaged with projects and partnerships that are essentially trying to build a different way of knowing. So much of the kind of world of science has been based on these kind of individual projects, with small teams that are pursuing over sometimes very long periods of time the production of new information or the organization of that information.
Yes.
I think what we see in, this era, not only of AI, but also increasing geopolitical conflict, fragmentation, misinformation, is that the way humans come together to understand the world is one of the kind of fundamental public goods that we should be not only protecting but enhancing. I don't think, kind of post the rise of mis and disinformation and the kind of fragmentation of the public square, I don't think we've yet found a way to create that new way of knowing together.
Yes.
And I think AI will both create opportunities for that, but will also in some ways add fuel to some of the less helpful flames that is kind of burning through our society.
Yeah.
So the way we approach AI is partly, of course, around, using great models to improve the efficiency of the way that our users can do the work they need to do.
Yeah.
So that to me is a kind of just an example of SaaS transforming into AI.
Yes.
So SaaS companies becoming AI companies or else being eaten by AI.
Yeah.
But I think at a kind of deeper level, we're also thinking about what does AI mean for scientific information and the way that science is both communicated and consumed.
Yes.
And so, of course, that gets to, these issues around precision, scientific integrity, but also essentially communities. How do, broad global communities interact with this information? Science is a social activity.
Yes.
Knowledge is a social activity. It's based on data. The scientific revolution was essentially an empirical revolution. It was saying, bring your arguments, bring your opinion, but only if they're grounded on data.
Yes.
So that is our world. Our world is always about bringing data to the arguments and opinions. So it's a deeply flawed human kind of world that we live in, and science is no different. But what we're really grappling with is how do we actually enhance systems in which those data have a stronger voice, and that needs to be done by engaging with global communities, not just with individual scientists or individual research projects.
It's so fascinating. This is, yeah. I knew my brain would explode in this interview as when I've spoken with you two. So that, I mean, it's so interesting because data is being used in some, like, there's lots of data sets, right? And there's some very biased scientific studies that get commissioned and everything else. And people are very happy to take those findings should they suit them. This is it's always happened. It's always happened, and this is presumably why your mission is so strong to sort of defeat those forces and make sure all the evidence in Covidence is sound. Assuming you're achieving that, how do you get people to look at your source? Because there is such a convenience to just looking at what the AI engine has put out, or the evidence of the, sponsor of certain research that is shared publicly. It feels like a battle even to get the eyes on your tool. Talk to me.
Yeah. So again, remember, we're talking about a workflow tool, not a kind of
Public
content set.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I think, look, I don't know if anyone really knows how, the market of information is going to look in the future. There's obviously a lot of worry about the fact that the AI tools essentially become the shop front, the role that social media has played to the way that the kind of general public finds and consumes information.
Yes.
I guess we are thinking about the kind of, again, the fundamentals, the building blocks of that kind of future system, with particularly an eye on, I guess in the end, the way that governments, those organizations or right around governments and other larger organizations really make sense and use this data. So our
Yeah.
primary focus is not really on kind of general consumer information.
No.
I would say the kind of things that we're starting to build are maybe we would propose necessary, but insufficient. So the kind of how the world ultimately deals with mis and disinformation, I think, is going to take efforts from many different players. So what we're really concerned about is if you think about, say, scientific communities that are engaged with one particular domain of knowledge, as you said, we've always had low quality science, with specks of gold throughout that. I think one of the strengths of the community of users we work with is that they have this incredibly well-developed sense of how do we pick the gold, from everything, all the other rubbish out there.
Yes.
Very, very kind of well-developed, precise methods for doing that, but have never really been able to pursue that at scale and at speed. And so I think our job ultimately is about empowering that community to kind of produce outputs from that. So whether it's directly into AI tools or data sets, that others, third parties, other actors in the kind of global evidence ecosystem can then consume in a way that is where those elements of scientific integrity are very explicit.
Yes.
And obviously here meaning not just human consumption, but also machine consumption. So to what extent does machines and humans who are ingesting that can be very clear about the degree to which there's a kind of scientific rigor and depth. There's very clear transparency about the data that's being used to get to that point.
Yes.
What kind of reproducibility or kind of testing of those claims have been done. And all of that, I think, has been very difficult to achieve to date because we haven't had the systems that can really do that at scale and at speed. And this is where, the kind of LLMs and other kind of newer developments are really exciting because, there is now this prospect of being able to do this at a kind of scale that we haven't been able to do before.
Yes. And to that fantasy of the AI assistant in the doctor's ear sharing the latest based on the symptoms in front of them, I've had that demonstrated as the sort of ultimate future of AI in medicine. I don't know if that's your ultimate, but
I think in health. So again, remember, we're working across all sectors. We do a lot of work in
Yes.
education and climate, but I think or you can think of any sector. Yeah, that level of decision support, I think, is inevitable. Like that's coming. Some of that's here already. But again, just keep in mind that kind of system has been there for many years, kind of decades. What we're talking about is a kind of really dramatic increase in the kind of sophistication.
Yes.
And much more kind of ambient kind of support. The question kind of traces back to, well, what kind of information is those systems drawing upon in order to produce that kind of support?
Yeah.
And the kind of systems we work in are they're very, very kind of high precision, high consequence kind of systems where the kind of questions you raised earlier, which is like, but so much of that information that are being consumed by LLMs is slop, and a lot of it is fraudulent. And so how are the foundation models making sense of that in a way that is consistent with kind of scientific integrity? We don't know currently, but again, I guess our hypothesis is that the world is going to value sources of information that are really deeply embedded in those kind of tenets of scientific integrity.
Absolutely. I mean, even more broadly in the recent weeks, we've been in Sasmageddon, as people call it, but that the emerging view seems to be it's about unique data and it's about unique context and workflow.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And, that's what I was saying earlier. I think the kind of, some of what we're doing is kind of analogous to what all SaaS companies are doing. But again, because of our mission, I think we've got to kind of focus on a kind of North Star or kind of lighthouse, which is really about not just how do we succeed as a company, but really what's the kind of shaping of that future world system that we want to push. And so I would say, yes, unique data, unique context, but I think ultimately it's about the way that people are interacting with those systems. So as I was saying earlier, how do we kind of, I guess, create interventions, whether they're kind of
Yes.
product interventions or kind of more like innovation model type interventions
Yeah.
that really enhance the way that humans are making sense of information together. I think that's really, I think, kind of critical for us in thinking around science. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not going to grapple with that kind of question in terms of, say, news, or you can think of a kind of analogous challenges for society. Our focus is really on science and the way science is used in society. Um,
It's that's a beautiful build on those two context and data of almost community.
yeah, and again, I think here we have to,
view.
yeah, and not like let's all just hold hands and dance around the fields under that. But it is ultimately, again, I think this recognition that at a fundamental level, science and knowledge, evidence it is a collective process. It doesn't occur in a vacuum. It doesn't occur as an individual. You could say it's deeply semantic. It's about kind of sense making, and different communities make sense of the world in different ways. So how do we enable those communities to do that? So you're kind of, working to reduce the unhelpful noise, whilst also recognizing, there's no ultimate truth. Communities have different perspectives. You need to kind of surface that creativity, that diversity,
Mm.
but in a way that kind of helps those communities both work as a community, but then also work together, with others.
Yeah. Amazing. I'm still hoping you can also solve news information and we could find that said Covidence backed or something.
Yeah, well, again, I think that idea that if scientific communities were able to organize in this way, then of course you could imagine some sort of feed of information that could be speculative, but could be an important kind of, signal of trustworthiness.
Trustworthiness. Awesome. Yes. I'm not giving up on that. Look, my last question, penultimate, Julian, thank you so much for your time and such a fascinating insight into your work. What is your, you've shown amazing learning agility in everything you've done for the last 12 years. And congratulations on the success to date. What is your top advice for a founder or new CEO in their journey?
Look, at this point, I think I'd have to say it is kind of all about AI. Like, I've just got to immerse and try and kind of surf the wave. I mean, that's very kind of practical, zeitgeisty kind of, but I think it's true, really. Yeah, it's just, I think, clearly such a transformational technology. Of course, in doing that, it's thinking through, it's many people have said this, the really powerful applications of these new technologies have not been invented yet. It's like the inventors of the internet didn't foresee TikTok, those kind of statements. So, the really powerful applications will be completely different models. They're not just AI as a feature. They are really, truly, truly deep transformations. So I think it's about trying to not get caught in current paradigms, whilst at the same time understanding that you've got to build for users. You've got to be, ultimately it's about being as close as possible you can to users and real use cases. So I think that kind of classic, it's the kind of Sam Waltman, be as close as you can to users or someone else will be, versus the Steve Jobs of like, our users don't know what,
Yes,
what's
it's about the perfect product.
Yeah. So I think finding your way, kind of picking through those kind of two extremes, I think is like, I guess maybe one of the, key paths to success as a new founder.
Yeah, and I hear that as, and it reminds me of Collis, who I've interviewed from Envato, also, that actually when you say close to users, actually the incredibly powerful thing about both of you is you're actually a part of the community of users.
Sure.
You're an actual signed up member, and that's how close you need to be to
Yeah. No, I don't think you need to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, there's many examples of founders who have not been that. I think it is true. It can give you some perhaps intuition, but I would say one of my journeys is kind of unlearning some of that. So, retaining that sense of the community and our users and,
Yes.
kind of deep understanding of their jobs to be done. But whilst at the same time, kind of unpicking that and having some kind of skepticism, I think, for your own, just an individual perspective. So I'm a great believer in product and product processes. I've learned so much from, the great product leaders I've worked with.
Yeah.
So I think some of that is about having real kind of humility about your perspective as a single individual, and really listening to the data that, again, the data, that you that we're getting in the interactions with all of our users. I think that's critical.
Yeah, almost unlearning some of in order to take on the new discipline, like product. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Julian. It's
not at all.
a pleasure to talk to you today.
It's wonderful to talk to you, Helen. You've been such a great contributor to this community, so it's great to see this continuing.
It's very kind. I try.